Okay, so this video I wanted to talk a little bit about how I avoid reading slumps. Sometimes you just can't help it. They are coming whether you like it or not. But I have found that if I do certain things or change certain things, I'm less likely to fall into a reading slump. Before, I would give myself like a very set list of books. I want to read this one, and then after that, I need to read this one. After that, I need to read this one. And I quickly found that it was making reading not as fun when I did it that way. So I've changed some stuff up. I've started doing some other things, and it has helped me lessen the amount of reading slumps that I have. And even when I have a reading slump, it's pretty short. So I'm going to explain to you what I did to help that and hopefully give you some tips on how you can avoid book slumps. The first tip that I have, take a break. Literally take a break from reading. Maybe every month or every few months. Just like take a week off and do something else. Or take like one day a week to not touch your book and do other things. Sometimes you are just pushing yourself to do too much of it. So if I spend every single day after work just sitting down and reading all day long, it starts to kind of wear on me a little bit. So I'll just take breaks. If I don't feel like reading that day, I don't read that day. If I feel like I've been reading too much and neglecting like some household chores or some of my other hobbies, I will take a weekend off and I won't read for a weekend. I'll just do other things. And I feel like that has helped me enjoy reading more and be more excited to read. I am definitely one of those people that hyper focuses on an activity. So if I let myself fall into that, I will literally never get any chores done. I will not touch my homework. I will not touch my other hobbies. I will become like a little bit obsessive over one activity. Just a part of ADHD sometimes. I've learned to live with it after almost 20 years. But ew, that's insane to say. I don't like thinking about that. But yeah, take some breaks. Let yourself enjoy other things. You don't have to read every single day to be a reader. You can read one day a week or one day a month. You're still a reader. Doesn't matter how many books you read or how often you read, how long you read. Taking breaks is not going to make you any less of a reader. So that's my first tip and the easiest tip that I have. The next ones are a little bit more involved. So we'll jump into those next. My next two tips are kind of the same, kind of not, but I have started allowing myself to be a mood reader. I know some people like a structured list. I have found that I have a lot more fun when I'm allowing myself to just read whatever catches my eye or whatever I feel like reading. That has made it so much easier to enjoy reading and read more. Every once in a while, I just get sick of a genre or like a series. I cannot read a series all the way through back to back. Cannot do it. I have to put a different book in between each one or I get so burnt out on it. I forget what series I tried to do that with. I think it was the Shatter Me series. I read the first book and I absolutely loved it and I jumped right into the second book and I do love it, but it was too much of the same story and it made it kind of slower for me. maybe it wasn't Shatter Me. I think it might have been ACOTAR. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and then A Court of Mist and Fury right after. And I realized that after that second book, I was like, I don't want to read this series. So I was like, we're just not going to try to read it all the way through. We're going to take breaks in between. I put like a book or two in between each book in the series, and have found that makes it a lot easier for me. I know a lot of people have to read a series all the way through. They don't like to put books in between because they're worried they'll forget what happened and stuff like that. If it works better for you to read all the way through it, then do that. But I have found that if I let myself mood read a little bit more often and just kind of look around, I have literally shelves all over my bedroom hanging on the walls everywhere. So I have books surrounding me every single time I walk into my room. It's crazy. But I will literally just stand around, like, glance at all my shelves, and whichever book spine jumps out to me, I'm reading you. Like, you're my buddy tonight. So try letting yourself mood read a little bit more. And in that same kind of vein, jump around with your genres. I know some people will stick to only one genre and that's all they'll read. Some people only read romance. Some people only read fantasy. Some people only read fiction. Like, jump around a little bit. It adds just a little bit of something different and makes it not so monotonous. Now, I know that, like, no two books are exactly the same. I hope we don't like plagiarism here. But if you are reading the same genre all the time, some people like it. I personally can't do it. It gets way too... I can't do that much consistency. I need consistency, but not in my books. So I'll, like, read a couple horror thriller books and then I'll jump into a fantasy book. I can usually only read one fantasy book at a time. I'm still kind of getting used to the whole fantasy genre, so usually after a fantasy, I have to jump into something a little more serious. So after a fantasy, I'll jump into a nonfiction book. I absolutely adore nonfiction books. I adore true crime. So after something like a fantasy, sometimes it can be a little bit relieving to jump into a true crime or a nonfiction and read something that, like, I know about, is like solid information, and it makes it easier for me to jump back into, like, a romance or a fiction book, something like that. So maybe try jumping around a little bit. Just let yourself read whatever you want to read at the time. That can help it be more fun. It's less of a chore, less of a job, less of something you have to do. It makes it a lot more fun. So try that out, and then follow some of my other tips I have coming up in conjunction with that. And maybe it'll be even better. So this tip is actually a new one for me. Join a book club. If you have to go all in on something like me, join multiple book clubs. I am currently in 3 book clubs, considering joining a 4th, which I know sounds absolutely insane, and it is insane. I have 3 book club meetings a month, but 2 of them are silent book clubs, meaning you just bring whatever you're reading at the time, and that's what you read. One of them is a more structured book club. We all read the same book once a month. We meet and we talk about it. We discuss. We have discussion questions. It's a little bit of structure within my organized chaos, as I like to call it. But joining a book club can help you discover new genres or find new favorites. I have always been very weary about historical fiction. I'm not a history person. Historical fiction has never really been my thing. But this book club, for some reason, reads a lot of historical fiction. And I've actually started to realize that I do kind of like historical fiction, at least a little bit. I don't hate it anymore. I used to hate it. I don't hate it anymore. And I never would have realized that and opened those new opportunities for myself without joining that book club. So join a book club and find some new favorites, or join a silent book club and find some reading buddies. Sometimes that's all you really need to help keep it exciting. I have found a whole new group of amazing friends in my silent book clubs, and we go to events together. We have book themed parties like every few months with each other. We do like PowerPoint nights for like book-ish themes. It is so fun. It is really fun to talk about the book that I'm reading with them, or if we're all reading the same book, or I'm reading a book that they've already read, we talk about it, and it makes it so much more fun. When you have a community of people around you that get you excited for it, it just makes it so much easier to do, I feel. So even if it's not an in-person book club, there are so many online book clubs. I know a lot of booktubers and book talkers have like Patreon book clubs. I am not in any paid book clubs, so I can't really steer you towards those. The Fable app, even though I know it's had some iffy circumstances lately, you can join a book club there. I believe Goodreads also has book clubs, but like, just look around. I know there are plenty of book clubs that are just a Discord server that they're all on together, and they'll have like video chat nights or things like that, which is also really fun. So just look in your area, see if there are any book clubs, look online, see if there are any book clubs, join a book club, and let the people around you get you excited to read. That's really the gist of that one. I have one more that is also a little bit, not stupid, but simple. And that's why I wanted to end on it, because it is a very simple tip, but one that has helped me a lot. So we'll talk about that. My final tip for avoiding book slumps. This has helped me exponentially. Reread books you know you already like. It's just that simple. I have multiple books on my shelf that I have read 10 plus times. If I am not really getting excited about anything on my shelf I haven't read yet, I'll pick up an old favorite and it'll get me right back into it. Sometimes if you read something too much, you start to get kind of bored of it. But I really, really like to reread books. One of my favorite things to do when I reread a book is to look for things that I hadn't noticed in the past. A good example, 1984. I have read that book so many times. I absolutely love that book. Animal Farm. I've read it so many times. I have an annotated copy of it that I annotated. Like, I love those books. And anytime I'm kind of falling into a book slump, I know it's going to happen, or I can feel it starting to come on, I will pick up an old favorite and I'll just happily read an old favorite of mine. It also makes it a lot easier. You already know the story. You've already read it. So it makes it easier to get through it, to just kind of re-experience things. You can look for new little details that were hidden. It just makes it a lot easier to get through it. And I feel like the ease of that can help you to not get super slumped out on whatever you're reading at the time. So maybe try that out if you have any favorites, or even, this is going to sound crazy to some people, but read books that you loved as a child. Some books are just ageless. My mic died and I had to get a new one. But as I was saying, yeah, read books from your childhood. I really, really loved The Hunger Games when I was younger. I was in intermediate school, so like 5th and 6th grade when The Hunger Games came out. Reread The Hunger Games. There are so many things that you did not notice when you were younger that you will notice now as an adult. It is so cool to go back into it and see it in a whole different way. I don't know if anybody will know what this is, but Inkheart by Angela Funk, if that's her name. I believe that's her name. I will find it and I'll put a picture of it up here. But I absolutely loved that book when I was younger. I checked it out of my intermediate school library at least 5 times because I loved it so much. And I recently found it and the second book in a secondhand bookstore. Immediate purchase. I could not believe that I found it in a bookstore. It like unlocked a memory in my brain that I didn't know that I had. And I cannot wait to reread it now because I want to see if I love it just as much. Aragon was big when I was younger. Sometimes I'll reread that and enjoy that. The Truth About Alice is a book that I got. Oh my Lord, how old was I think I was late intermediate school, early middle school. I was probably early middle school. So like 13, 12, 13, I got that book. Absolutely love it. I've read it at least 12 times. I love that book. So sometimes I'll just go back and read that book again. And it just gets me excited to read again. It's not very complicated. It's very simple. But those are all the tips that I have for avoiding a book slump. If you have some tips of your own, please put them in the comments because I'll always take more tips. But yeah, that's all I have for today. So happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.